Hey guys, welcome to the Madhav, Mia, and Malik podcast. On today's episode, we're going to be going over Super Tuesday and some of the primary results. As we're recording this right now, South Carolina's just come in with Joe Biden winning in a landslide and Bernie taking 6 delegates. So, Madhav, do you want to start off?
Yeah, I think this is pretty much the story we're hearing now. It's like Bernie versus everyone else. And unless someone decides to consolidate the moderate vote in the party, I don't think there's any stopping Bernie.
What do you think this does in terms of Biden's chances in the general? Will he have even a shot? Is he the only person that can contest, or anybody else on your radar?
I think like after this primary, Biden like puts himself as like the moderate candidate that everyone, technically should get behind if their views are what matters the most for the candidates, right?
Mhm.
So if he presents to himself as like the moderate candidate, which he which he does after this landslide victory, I think it's good for him. Good for him.
Okay. So, Tassine, do you think this will have any impact on Super Tuesday?
So I don't think it will have impact on Super Tuesday because most of the states that vote on Super Tuesday have early voting, and so like a lot of the people who vote on those states are already sent cast their vote, and even for the people who haven't cast their vote, I don't think they were like waiting on like picking between Bernie and Biden. That road's like for Super Tuesday, that decision's kind of been made. I think it's like people who are deciding like, oh, I don't know who to vote for. We're thinking like, oh, is it Bloomberg or is it Biden? And that's another thing. I guess the one effect it could have is the battle between Bloomberg and Biden for the moderate like support could have shifted, but it's like hard to tell because there are so many variables going on here.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I don't think the overall result will change too much because of South Carolina. Also, not only because of like the early voting thing, but because the electorate who is voting in Super Tuesday is nothing like South Carolina's electorate. There's a lot more there's a lot of minorities too, but they're not the same minority that's the controlling minority in South Carolina, right? Like the um, elderly black voters that we often hear about as like the group to get to in South Carolina. They're not they don't have that kind of voting power in the Super Tuesday states. Those will be more led by Latinos and Asians. As far as minorities go, I mean, obviously there's like other words among minorities. Those are the two most important voices, and for that, I would look to the Nevada vote because that electorate is the most similar to that, and so like you already know the results of that.
Yeah. I agree with you for the most part in terms of what it's going to do in like affecting Super Tuesday elections, but I disagree that it's mostly based on early voting. I don't think that the majority has put in their ballots because of early voting. There is a substantial population, but I think most people still go to the polls on day of. But I also don't think that they're looking to this election. Well,
As like a guiding,
yeah, I don't think they're looking at South Carolina like, okay, I'm in between these two candidates. Biden's obviously going to get my vote. I think it's more that the progressives are set on who their two votes are going to, and that's Warren Sanders, and Sanders getting, I think, at least 90% of the progressive vote. I think this might help Biden stop Buttigieg and Biden taking away some of his votes, but I just don't. I think Buttigieg has too much momentum. I think Bloomberg is spending enough money to siphon off votes from Biden to make it basically non-competitive. I think if Biden had every moderate vote in the Democratic Party, I think he would have had a very good shot against Bernie. And I think there's too many people that are sticking side by side with him to even have a good shot.
It's a very interesting result that I want to see from Super Tuesday, how many votes Bloomberg gets, because his vote, like the fact that he's getting votes at all is absolutely amazing to me, because what he's doing, right? Not like forget his policies and his background, right?
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't on the ballot on the first 4 states. The only reason he's relevant is because he's spending over $500 million in advertising. So this is basically just saying like, oh, he's relevant because he has money. That is pretty much the argument. Like people who say like, oh, he's a moderate or he's this that, like they didn't care if he was a moderate or not before he started spending like a lot of money. they only kind of started caring after they saw ads and they were like swayed by his ads. And again, if you remember, ads are biased and like they very very like almost choosing to vote someone through an ad is kind of hilarious to me. But like the fact that his ads spending is what's might get him votes is a very telling thing about the American electorate that's voting. That like I think, do we agree, at least, okay, let me get your opinions on this. What do you guys think of like voting for a candidate because you saw their ad, regardless of like the policy positions, right? Like seeing their ads and being like, oh, I might want to vote for them. Like how do you guys feel about that?
Malav, what do you think?
Like, to be fair, I decided to vote Andrew Yang after reading his book, right?
Not an
That's a
ad.
very different ad.
Right.
It's
right.
better
It's not
than,
a YouTube ad. You
it's
read a
better
book.
than YouTube ads and Mike Bloomberg buying memes on Instagram, which is a
Oh,
huge thing.
dude,
as well.
remember when his face was on that orange thing during the dude? Man paid someone to Photoshop his face onto fruits and post it on Instagram. Like, holy,
I don't-
surreal.
He's getting his name out there though. That's what I think is most
Yeah,
important.
what is he competing with Chiquita Bananas?
Possibly.
Nah, like, you guys need to understand that, like, these debates get less debate or whatnot, get less viewership than, say, some podcasts get online.
Oh, no. I'm not saying debates decide. It wasn't about the debates. It was the fact that he was
Right.
advertising technique more so.
Exactly. That's my point. So, like, his aim is, like, to reach... I mean, I'm not saying that it's right, but, like, for what he's aiming to do, what he is doing seems to be working.
Yes, but
Right.
would you have expected this mechanism to work? You spend enough on ads and then you get enough of the electorate.
Yeah,
or
I mean...
part of the electorate?
Okay, so it's like me personally, I would expect it to work, but I don't think that's morally right. Those are like two different issues, but
Yeah. No, I wasn't attacking because I think the moral aspect of the argument is, I don't know anyone who could argue the other side of it, where like, oh, if you spend enough on ads, then like that is the morally correct way to convince people. I can't see that argument happening, but it's whether that mechanism works or not, because it's amazing.
I got two questions for you guys then. So one, I want to see your perspective on the morality of running ads, because I have no problems with it whatsoever. Most of them are showing himself in a positive light, which I'm fine with. If they're negative ads, I don't really like those. But so one, your morals, and two, what do you mark as successful?
Okay.
the fact that he's even like polling in double digits right now, to me, is successful, because like all he has done is spent money on ads. If anything, his participation in debates has brought him down.
Mhm.
Right?
Mhm.
So, like, whatever he's built up, whatever his campaign is right now, is entirely through his ads and the money he has spent. So, if that doesn't say successful, I don't know what does. He's garnered a bigger supporting than Andrew Yang.
Well, I think a lot of this also stems from him being a political figure in the past. Andrew Yang didn't have that.
Right,
Like,
exactly.
Bloomberg, at least in the past, has shown like, I'm a moderate. I've been mayor of a city. I've been mayor of the biggest city in the world for many years. Like, I know what to do. He knows
Remember
how to
when
go
he
about things.
repealed term limits so he could be mayor for a third term?
He tried to.
He tried.
No, his third term was because of it was used to be 2 terms. Then it got extended to 3 terms because of him. And then he couldn't push anymore, but still got to 3 terms, which is crazy.
Like, whether like besides that, just overall, like, can you attribute the ads to all his success? Because I think a lot of it is just he's another moderate, and people don't like Buttigieg or Biden as a moderate, so he's just another area to go to. I think that's what it more is. I think him getting his name out in terms of ads are helping him, but I think that's what's really backing most of his support and most of his base.
I disagree with you on that point, that he's getting votes because he's another moderate, because this field, right, didn't have a lack of moderates. Think of all the candidates, right? There's so many other people who had political positions in the past and who are also moderates, and they didn't get support, but he is. And what's the difference between other people who are moderates and not getting support? Like, Klobuchar, Buttigieg, Biden. Before the race, Tom Steyer. Before it even narrowed by that much, there was who was the lady who dropped? The senator.
Gillibrand, but she was progressive.
No, the senator.
Yeah, Kristen Gillibrand, bro.
No.
That's
She was on the
irrelevant.
debates. She's like the lawyer one.
Oh, Kamala Harris.
Kamala
Kamala
Harris,
Harris,
right?
okay, yeah.
So there were all these moderate
Moderates.
candidates, right? And no one could consolidate double-digit support in the polls, but he could. And I think the reason that like the thing that separates him from the rest of the moderates is his spending power. And
Another thing, like, I mean, I genuinely think it's so counterproductive to the entire cause. If they truly want their moderate views to be the views of the next president, hopefully, or like who they hope to be the next president, they would consolidate with one candidate. Because right now the moderate votes in total outnumber the progressive votes. There's no
100%.
there's no debating that.
The thing about that is, like, yes, if they all consolidated, but that's also what being moderate is.
That
You're
like the pickiest eater.
You're the pickiest eater. You want what you want, and that's it. If you don't like Bernie because of one specific policy,
Bernie's done.
you'll move. You'll go to Warren. You'll go to someone else. Like, I think that's what it is. Moderates are very picky, and it's very hard to consolidate moderates who occupy a huge spectrum, really. Because the progressives only occupy one certain area. They all want the same policies because they're that far left. Moderates go from slight left to slight right and straight down the middle, and up and down in terms of the political spectrum, in terms of libertarian and stuff like that.
Authoritarian.
Yeah, so they're all over the place. So for them to consolidate isn't realistic.
I think this is especially reflected in the fact that before the Democratic Party had like a massive progressive wing, that there used to be so much infighting in the Democratic Party because it was the party of the moderates. And like, so everyone would have like a litmus test for their candidate. And so it would be very hard for any candidate to like garner a lot of support, which is what like makes Obama's run stand out as like so like insane, that he could gain support in like such a picky group of people.
And through grassroots as well. It was organic.
Yeah. It's absolutely insane what he pulled off.
Right.
For me, it's the greatest election candidate of all time. One of the most well-rounded candidates.
He's a very well-rounded.
In terms of his campaign, it was brilliantly run.
Okay,
Whether
sure.
or not you like him as a person, that's obviously up to you and your
I
politics.
wasn't talking about his person. Or his politics. I was talking about like even his campaign. Yeah, it was a
His
very
campaign
good.
was
His
brilliant.
campaign was very brilliant.
It really started the modern grassroots movement
If
in terms
anything,
of social media and stuff like that as well.
If anything, you could say that what gave rise to the progressives is kind of like the fact that Obama established like the grassroots, like she like created the playbook for the grassroots. That's kind of what allowed the progressives to like gain such a controlling like factor in the Democratic Party.
Mm-hmm.
And so so saying that, I don't think like I completely agree with your point that it was a foregone conclusion that the moderate vote was going to split.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also very amusing to me to see like the Democratic establishment get like dismantled in real time as votes go in.
Wait.
It is
Like, see, I guess my point was like, if any of the moderates were to drop right now,
yeah.
who would those voters vote for? Because
You
one,
don't know that.
right,
You know
exactly.
Joe Biden's second most in surveys, the second most person that people said they'd switch to if Joe Biden dropped was Bernie Sanders.
Okay, so now is that based on political view?
No,
Or
because they don't.
based on popularity? That's what
Yeah.
I'm saying. Exactly. So then that's where things like what Bloomberg is doing comes in real handy.
Yeah.
If he puts himself out there, like, and a moderate candidate drops, like, he is the first name that comes out of your tongue for many Americans. So,
I agree with you that if the moderate candidates consolidated to one candidate, that would give them the best chance to like stop Bernie.
Mm-hmm.
But I think what the best they can hope is for a brokered convention, and I don't think if every single moderate candidate dropped today, right?
Yeah.
And except one, and that except one, they would still not secure the nomination, or I would be even surprised if they got majority of the delegates. Forget like enough to get the nomination, right? I would be surprised if they got more delegates than Bernie Sanders at this point.
Let me guess.
They
Let
can
me ask you.
prevent him from getting half of them.
Right. Let me ask you a question. Say Bernie is leading in the number of delegates they have by the time they reach the brokered convention. Do you think he should be president at the time because he's leading in the number of delegates?
Okay, so are you familiar with the Chicago riots of, I forgot which 1900s year, but so this only happened one time in history where there was a brokered convention, and the person who had the most delegates did not become the nominee because he was a progressive actually for the time, and they gave it to like a more moderate person, and then there were riots, and then that was the biggest landslide defeat for Democrats in history, and Reagan got elected. I forget if it was Reagan or Nixon or one of them got elected at that point because of that. Like because it was the second term of a Republican president, followed by a new Republican president, because the Democrats fucked it up that bad on that. Like it was like a terrible thing. But here's the thing, I would not be surprised if it happened again, because the Democratic Party is not a party that like learns lessons.
Yeah, that's what I was.
I would not be surprised if it happened again. I'd be like, oh yeah, hey, let's go riot, boys.
Yeah, like I was gonna say there were, I don't know, I was just like scrolling through my news feed, and I saw a bunch of articles saying that some top Democratic leaders were willing to risk party damage to stop Bernie Sanders to win from winning in the brokered convention.
Dude, forget party damage. There will not be a party.
It would split the party legitimately. There might be a third.
Like there would the Democratic Party is done if Bernie Sanders gets majority of the delegates and they don't give him the nomination. Like the party will collapse.
We wouldn't see another
legitimate
Democratic nominee for what, another 20 years at that point?
Yeah, like that would kill the party.
That's a generational damage.
Yeah.
Because
it's great how much power he has now, right, Bernie?
It is very surprising to me because I was a Bernie supporter for like a long time, right? Like since 2016. Right. I backed Bernie then, and then I never like gave up on him after. But
I think that's where a lot of his advantage comes from. He's technically been campaigning for like
4 years at this point.
More than 4 years. Like also the 2016.
Oh, true.
So basically 8 years. He's never stopped. Even as senator, like a lot of these people go back to their jobs just in Congress and they kind of like let it go. He never let that go.
He never let go like saying what he says.
Yeah.
And if you count that as campaigning, then you can say he's been campaigning for 30 years because
he always had his name in the round.
He's always had his like saying like stuff out loud to like the people, like addressing the people instead of just like what a lot of senators do, who like go cast a vote, go talk to their donors, rinse and repeat, right? Yeah. He has been addressing the American public directly for like a very long time, and it has been like the same message the whole time.
I think the result of the 2016 election also helped him, in terms of this election, because one big question that a lot of people had, like in the months after Hillary lost,
was that could Bernie have done better?
Could Bernie have done it? And I think that question lingered long enough for him to like act upon it.
I mean, that's kind of like my first like top response that I hand out when people say that a socialist can't beat Trump, and I'm like, well, you tried with a moderate in 2016. Look how that went.
I mean, the caveat was that the moderate was Clinton.
Yeah, but that's a more nuanced argument. But most people who say that, oh, a socialist can't beat Trump, are not making a nuanced argument, right? Like, you're not gonna. So, it is a very like, notable thing that people remember, and yeah, it is very hilarious to me because here's the thing: let's say Bernie somehow gets the nomination, right? He then has the power to name the new chair of the Democratic National Committee, the power to name a bunch of like all the top dogs in the Democratic National Committee, which is like the Democratic Party's like head, right? He gets to assign those. So if he gets the nomination, all the people who are like the heads right now, they'll lose their job.
We'll see AOC in 2040.
Yeah, like it'll be
40?
Yeah, I'll see her there.
like
Like,
there's like it is a there's like a power struggle going on in the Democratic Party, and the establishment is losing.
Yeah.
And that like if honestly like if the progressives were the establishment and the progressives were winning, like this primary would have been long over.
Mm-hmm.
This primary would have been over a long time ago. Like it's only because the fact that the moderates are in power and they don't want to give up power is that they're doing this. And what it will come down to is them deciding whether they want to keep power, like keep the party or keep power. And if they choose to keep power, then, you know, we'll see what will happen.
Like, I mean, technically, like, even if they do attempt to, like, keep power, I think they will lose it. I also think they deserve to lose
I
it.
think they know that, I don't know. No, I'm not going to say anything like they know. I think it is inevitable that the moderates in the Democratic Party will lose power.
Inevitable.
Because, you know, I think it is fairly inevitable because a party of moderates is not a party. Parties have, like, leanings, right? A party of moderates is not a party. So what is happening is that the Democratic Party is, like, finally choosing a leaning instead of just being moderate.
Mm-hmm.
And so what will happen is that moderates will no longer have a party, and that's, like, kind of what's freaking them out.
but that's bad.
That is bad.
But that is
That's
the reality in kind of, like,
That's a failure of democracy.
that's a failure of the electoral system. I think that it forces the two-party system like they got lucky that one of the two parties was like the moderate party, but it is soon going to be there's soon not going to be a moderate party.
Yeah.
And almost any country that has like fewer than like 5 parties don't have like a moderate party.
Yeah.
I would say that's like does anything significant. If you look at most countries, right, like we always talk about the election through the lens of the U.S. politics, but if you think about it, the mechanism of elections and parties and all these things.
It's very specific to the U.S.
No,
Very specific.
I know the two-party system is very specific to the U.S. because the U.S. government.
Not even in terms of two-party system, but just the presidential system as a whole.
No, there are other countries with the
There are a
president.
few other, but very, very few. The
I know,
majority are
most of the-
parliamentary.
have
The
that-
majority of
just-
developed countries are also parliamentary.
Parliamentary,
So
yeah.
the only ones we even compare ourselves to in terms of voting standards and how many people are coming out to vote
Yeah.
and even stability of democracy, they're not using our system.
Yeah.
We are the greatest democratic experiment. We're also the greatest presidential system
Yeah.
because we're also the only stable presidential system.
That's true.
It's amazing.
Most
if
of
you
the
think about
presidential
it.
systems I think that I can think of off the top of my head are
South American.
South American
Because
and
we put 'em
African.
there.
And
Yeah.
African, actually.
Yeah, we know how African nations unfortunately work.
Yes. Or the
Which-
lack
which
of
is-
working.
Yeah, which is very sad.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's why this hurts me. Like seeing these elections, 2016, and even now, really, really hurts me because the moderates getting
I
kicked
think-
out, and it's a failure of American democracy.
I
which
think
is like,
the moderates, if Bernie wins, or like, if even, oh, actually, I'm going to say Bernie. If like a Democrat who's not named Bloomberg wins, I think there's a chance that
Strong
the
endorsement there.
Yeah, like there's a chance that moderates will return to a powerful position because there's a lot of like sentiment to eliminate the electoral college, which both the moderate candidates and the progressive candidates won, and to have ranked choice, which is a very progressive stance, but either of those things and both of those things will help bring moderates back to power because ranked choice voting is like kind of designed for like to give moderates the most leverage because it's like designed for people who are picky.
Yeah.
As opposed to the first past post system which we have right now, where like the first person to get to 50% wins.
But see, the thing is, the first past the post is in like it's currently a thing right now because the people that decide on what it's going to be are the ones that win that.
No. That's the thing. The Democrats do not win first. Okay, they win first past the post. True, correct, but they don't win the electoral college system.
Yeah, we don't.
So that's why I said if any Democrat not named Bloomberg comes to power, they will most likely see the writing on the wall that the Electoral College is bad for them politically. I am too cynical to think they'll see the good of the country, but they'll at least see their own self-interest, that this is bad for them, and they will push to eliminate it.
I'm not sure if they really are in the position to even do that, because I mean,
If they get enough votes, so here's two ways I could see this happening, right? If the Democratic candidate wins with enough of a margin to overcome like the election interference from foreign governments and election whatever suppression that happens, right? They will win with it will bleed down ballot, because if what happens is a lot of people who pay attention to the national election don't pay attention to their local elections, and what they do is they vote for whichever party they down the ticket that they voted for the president. This is like a very like known effect that whenever there's big turnout, Democrats win all over the board, because people kind of vote like whichever party they vote for president, they kind of vote that down the ticket. So what I think then will happen is that Democrats will expand their majority in the House and possibly capture a majority in the Senate. And if they capture a majority in the House and the Senate, I think they can pass an amendment.
I'm not sure about majority in the Senate.
Not enough to pass an
I
amendment.
don't think so. It's also
Not a 67.
The only way it would happen is through states, but I'm not sure if enough states actually want that to occur in the first place because of who's being elected there. Because like
no states, it'll never happen through states, because Electoral College gives states a lot of power, and states
that's what I'm saying. We can't do it through amendment, and you can't do it through states. Certain states do it. I believe Washington and Oregon do it right now. They have implemented laws the past 2 years to do it. In the sense of whoever wins the popular, they.
That's another thing that could happen. That the do you know the Popular State Compact, Popular Vote Compact? A lot of states are signing on to this compact, Interstate Association Compact, that basically says that they will pass legislation. How it works is like they pass legislation in their state, and if it passes, then how that state's voting works is that if enough states have signed the compact to hold a majority of the electorate, right, then they will cast their vote to whichever candidate has got the majority of the popular vote.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Popular State Compact. So I think it is. So the nice thing about it is that it only kicks in if enough states have, with the controlling power, like approve the legislation in their state governments, which is what like is the reason any states approve it at all, because they're like, oh, we approved it and nothing changed at all. Great. We did legislation, boys. And then so what will happen, I think, is if a Democratic president wins, there will be enough state legislatures with Democratic majorities to pass that legislation. And when that legislation passes, and because here's another thing, they have this tunnel vision where they feel like, oh, this won't affect us, but like it doesn't affect you until like it does. And so if that kicks in, then they can that I think is the most likely way the Electoral College should get eliminated. I think the second most likely way is that if Democrats get Senate majority and House majority, they can also like pass it through a bill.
Okay, wait. Let me just stop this here. And this is more a question for Madhav right now. Should it be removed in the first place, the Electoral College, in terms of an American democracy standpoint, in terms of stability of democracy, in terms of a moral argument? What do you think?
I don't know. It was obviously implemented for a reasonable reason when it was implemented. I don't know, maybe some sort of recalibration of the Electoral College, because like the amount of Electoral College votes that each state gets is based on
No.
Well, no. You have the two Senate.
Yeah.
And then population.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So then, like maybe some sort of recalibration to take into account, like different factors. I mean, I'm not too well versed in like the Electoral College, but I don't know.
What kind of recalibration are you talking about, though? Like, what do you mean by recalibration?
Okay, so you tell me, like, why would you say that the Electoral College is inefficient right now?
It's not inefficient. It is doing the wrong thing, where giving a minority of the people majority of the power.
Well, that was the point though.
That was the point.
Represent minority voices.
Exactly. The
majority is a bit lopsided because the reason
the
Trump
point
won
of
was,
representing the minority voices was the Senate, not the electoral college.
No, electoral college as well.
It was, but here's the thing: the electoral college gets to basically appoint one like political office, right? The president.
Mm-hmm.
The Senate does a lot more things than that, right? Compared to that.
I mean, today it doesn't. Today, right now, the majority of power is held by the executive office.
Okay, but that is also because the Senate voluntarily chose to give up that power.
Exactly.
But
so this should be more important today. Even it should be a better and more important institution as it is right now.
I think that for the office of president, the person who got the most votes, right, should hold the office of president. Not like states shouldn't choose the president. Because think about it this way. Think about senators, right? Senators are elected by popular vote. House majority leaders.
Exactly.
House
That's exactly the point, though. Senators are wait. Senators are. You said the senators are the ones who stand for minorities, and they correct this. Different. Like they empower. They give the minority the voice. If they're elected by the popular vote, how is the minority's voice being represented?
No. It's the popular vote of the state. A state senator is elected by that state, but a senator from New York and a senator from Rhode Island have the same amount of power in Congress.
Yeah, it's a different type of minority that they're defending. Like
they're defending a minority state, not like a minority population group.
Exactly. But that state deserves its rights to be heard, like what it wants.
So it is being heard in the Senate, the states shouldn't control the office of the president, right? Like that is because let me put it this way: the type of balancing where states get their right to be heard, right, in the political process, is like through how many representatives they get, right? Not through how the election for the representative works. The nature of an election, of a democratic election, right, is that whoever gets the most votes should win.
No. That within itself that's why I forgot who it was, whether it was Plato or Aristotle. That's why they had such a big problem with democracy, where they described it as mob rule. And that's why a republic came into being. Because it was to protect the minority from mob rule. And that's what this is really trying to do. It's at each level, it's trying to represent the voices of the minority. That's the main point of all of this. So at what point is it, the majority of the people in the country need it, versus this is now mob rule? So where's that fine line?
So that's what I'm saying. The representation for the smaller states, because think about the difference this way, right? Mm-hmm. If the population of Rhode Island has the same votes as the population of California, right? Which is the case in the Senate, right? Think about that population difference, right? That is a huge power that you're giving to the Rhode Island. And it's fine. I agree with you that even the European Union doesn't do like perfect population for each member state.
Absolutely not.
It's kind of dumb what they do. I think they try to do the electoral college, but they messed it up even more. But anyways, European Union is useless.
I like the EU, but
I like what they're doing as a concept. I hate their implementation of the concept.
That's a bit different.
I like the concept, but that being said,
Tassine, how about this? You have two ideologically homogeneous states of different sizes, right? The only variable that the Senate neutralizes
is population.
Is the difference in population size, but not minority views, right? You get what I'm saying?
So you're arguing there should be so what you're arguing for doesn't exist at all yet, right?
Right.
Where you're balancing based on like the view, like
I guess
for some kind of like identity. I mean, you're balancing it. You're talking about how the Indian Parliament works, right? They have like a quotas for like minority. Quotas for minorities.
Okay, Indian elections like a whole other episode.
No, forget the election. I'm talking about the Indian like.
I know the whole system is such a mess.
We'll just put a trash can on the screen and then we'll be done with that.
Right. No, but okay. So then that's true though. Like in India, there's so many different parties, right? We only hear about BJP and Congress, the only way these two parties consolidate power
It's by
is
forming
forming coalitions, right? So basically, every minority's voice is to some level heard if they form a coalition with the ruling party.
Right.
Right?
Part of the reason that they can have minorities is because of, okay, fine. I'll digress. Maybe having quotas or like some kind of like restructuring based on population identity or group identity for Congress might be a good idea, right? But the election of the president, right, should not be that way. Even in India, right, the election of the president is still popular vote.
All right, let's see. The ruling party cannot
Elect
get
the
the
president.
power without forming a coalition with all the tiny parties. And
Yeah.
if they want to form a coalition, the minority parties get some skin in the game.
No,
It's-
exactly. I know how the coalition system works, but the election of prime minister is different.
than president.
Oh, because the people that are like,
President is a puppet in India.
Yeah.
In India, president's a puppet.
it's an appointed thing, right?
Yeah.
Wait, so the prime minister is elected by the party, and then the party.
Yeah.
Okay. That's such a different system than
It is very different.
See,
selection
that's
works.
that's what I'm saying. We are such a unique experiment, and it's beautiful, but it's failing at the moment. That's what's so
But
scary.
I think that to implement something similar to that, where you give voices to minority groups, the first step to that should still be eliminating the electoral college, because the electoral college serves only one. You're not eliminating the Senate, right? Like the balance of state power and federal power is still there.
Little bit, see, then all the flyover states have no right to choose who the president is. You get the
Why do
East
they
Coast,
not?
you get the East Coast, you get the West Coast, you're done. That's it. That's where the majority of the population is.
Yeah.
If you live in rural Kansas or in Minnesota,
Okay,
or
well, the
Wyoming, you mean nothing to the American president.
Okay, well, the counter argument is that right now, if 3 million, like so many people, their vote doesn't mean anything compared to like the votes of people in the rural states.
Yeah, I think that should be recalibrated, like Mala was saying. But
But
to remove
how
the
would you-
electoral college system it's not an option.
Right.
Why?
It brings such an extreme to the table where it's just these two coasts dominating the elections.
Right.
We
Also,
give the flyover states. Well, I don't want to say the flyover states. My bad if you're from there on this podcast. I apologize. I don't want to give states that don't have.
hey, I'm for one of those.
This is why New York boys should not be making podcasts. But Midwest.
I'm Missouri proud. Missouri.
Now you know why Midwest people.
He's from Maryland. I'm from Virginia right now, so it's okay. I
It's
can say
okay,
that we're from here.
I am from a state that would get screwed by the elimination of the electoral college.
But see, that's exactly what I'm saying. Every single one of our
Absolutely.
states would be absolutely useless.
No,
right
Virginia would be.
now. They wouldn't do anything.
Virginia would not. Virginia would benefit. They lose more votes to electoral college than they do.
It's not significant.
Madhav's state would be screwed. My state would be screwed.
That's what I'm saying. There's so many states that would be absolutely screwed over by.
But
it.
no, it's in no. But here's the thing: they wouldn't be screwed in terms of governance. They would be screwed in terms of the presidential election,
which
right?
is very important.
Okay.
No, I'm not saying it's not important. 'cause-
Justine, if you in any other country you told me that, I would be fine with it. In America, just because of how much power the president holds, that's too big a power.
With prime ministers, it's very, very different. But here, the American president holds so much power because Congress has just given it to him because it's so much easier
But see,
for him.
the Congress can also take it away.
It's
The
hard,
president,
yeah.
it's not as hard as you think. If a Democratic president wins, they will not have nearly as much power as Trump does now. right
But
now.
see, the problem is, it's not that it's hard to take it away. There's no incentive to take it away.
Why is there no incentive?
Because if your party is in power with the president, it's so
Every
much
time
easier.
there has been a Democratic president in power, the Democrats have limited the president. Every time in the last 20 years.
I'm not sure about that.
Under Obama,
The Democrats like lowered his power. I don't think so.
Democrats did not have partisan vote on the partisan line vote on Obamacare.
Well, it's different. That's because it's a very, very, it's American healthcare, which is the most problematic thing in the world.
No.
Legitimately.
Obamacare, if that was true, Obamacare would have passed with way more votes than it did.
Well, it
The
shouldn't
Democrats
have.
had way bigger.
That's not limiting presidential power. That's just voting correctly. That's how they're supposed to vote.
No, wait, listen, Justine.
Okay, no, that's what I'm saying.
Justine.
There's president.
Don't moderate.
Justine, you're speaking about bringing voice to the minorities, right? And like the way the Congress votes is more representative of like minority
No,
ideology.
I'm not saying Congress
And
would not have done it that way. I'm saying that Congress does not vote along partisan lines because when there's a Democratic Congress,
See, that's
They're
based
not
on
limiting their power.
that's
though.
exactly so that's based on their constituents, right? They vote based on what's good for their people,
right?
right? It shouldn't be. That's exactly our point. What me and Hamza are saying, that it should not be dependent on what the president or the
No,
party.
that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. I am saying that I'm not saying it should be dependent on the president.
Yeah.
I am saying it is not dependent on the president, right?
Right.
That's why the executive branch loses power when there's a democratic.
Look at the amount of executive orders that have gone on during the last 2 to 3 presidencies. It's an enormous number. They're getting everything done that they want. Trump, not even through Congress, Trump has gutted up Obamacare through executive orders. For the most part, that's what he's done.
No. Actually, nothing about Obamacare passed in Congress, right? It's actually true. I think because I remember all this time about all these bills, and they were like, wait, they had a majority in the House and a majority in the Senate, and they still didn't pass it.
Yeah. The majority of things now come from executive orders, which is good to a certain extent, but it's also defeating the purpose of Congress. And that's why the presidential election matters so much now. If Congress was balanced like it should have been, and nobody actually
it's also because the Supreme Court got fully neutered. The Supreme Court, let's say, whatever president is in power, they just vote along the president.
Which is also another.
I don't get why that one happens at all. Like this was designed to be like.
Well, that's because of Theodore Roosevelt.
What do you guys think? Pete Buttigieg, one of his policies is like
expand the
Supreme Court to elected like the 6 extra would be elected
positions.
Yeah,
I fully hate that idea.
Why?
Because I like the institution of the Supreme Court as like something that should be beyond the politics, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even though it is not right now, it should be something that is beyond politics. I think if anything, the change should be in like how Supreme Court judges are appointed. It shouldn't be like
which is like
I don't think it should be election because there are many states that have their state Supreme Court legislatures filled through elections of judges, right? I don't think it should be an election, and all those states end up electing very partisan judges. I think it should be something like a career, like advancement track, right? Like if you serve this many years as a judge.
That's what it is now. Like the people
that is not what it is right now.
No. The people who are in contention for the Supreme Court justice part.
Yeah, but this is the appointment by the president, right?
Yeah.
They are appointed by the president, but they are at the highest.
That should not be the system. It shouldn't be the executive and the executive and the what's the Congress branch's name? I forgot. Legislative branch. You should like appoint the judicial branch's leaders, right? It should be like a career advancement, like promotion thing, where like
whoever is alive and has the most years under their belt.
Yeah, like
so then they're just going to be dying every other year.
Exactly.
That's not too bad. That's not
bad.
That's not that. No, not even that. Not even that. Okay, let's say you don't want it to be like. Let's say you want to not make it based on age.
Okay, fine. Wait, Tassine. What if there's like a disparity in political opinion based on age?
Okay, no, that's what I'm saying. No, that is definitely true, right? But I'm not saying it should even be based on age, right? I am saying like the system could be something like you have ruled over this many cases and this many types of cases, right? And it doesn't necessarily have to be like age. It could be like what if you get started as a judge relatively early, then you could get to that much faster at a much younger age.
So the problem with that is then who gets those cases becomes a politicized problem.
Exactly.
Well, no, cases are not assigned by politicians.
But it means like whoever does do that, it is now politicized.
But it's not. How is it politicized?
There's now pressure. Like who are you giving this to? What are their?
But who gives the case? It's not like an elected official who gives the case.
It's not, but elected officials can go and pressure whoever does it.
True, but it's still a lot.
Okay, fine. All right.
Okay, do you think how politicized the Supreme Court gets by orders of magnitude still, right?
Okay, but see, no matter what, like I know you want to be apolitical, and it should in theory, but the problem is that it being a part of obviously legislative branch, executive branch, it in itself is a political branch. It has to be politicized because it deals with political matters.
No, that doesn't mean I'm not saying it should not be politicized in the sense that it should not deal with politics. I'm saying should be politicized that the appointment to the Supreme Court should not go through a political process that involves the political parties, right? Political party system should not have a role in.
It always will, though. It always will. It's just how do we minimize that?
So right. So that's what I'm saying. Like you pointed out in my method, right? It doesn't eliminate it, but it does minimize it way more than it is right now, right? Like pressuring this official, that official. How many cases are you going to micromanage that way to like feed your candidate to the top? It's not a easy system.
No, see, Justine, the only problem that I can think with that is that, like, there are other biases that come about that will polarize not the entire Supreme Court, right? Because right now, the biases that are affecting the Supreme Court are like the two parties, right? And whenever they get the chance, they appoint the Supreme Court. So relatively, it's balanced, right? So when you have relatively, I said relatively,
Fine.
right? But
things are either balanced or not balanced, but okay.
No, I mean, no, like you have a fair, like, okay, you have a representation
first of all, it's an odd number.
It's an odd number, like
right, exactly.
It's either balanced or not.
Yeah, you have both viewpoints represented. That's my point, though.
But it doesn't matter if it's an odd number. Like a 5-4 ruling is a 5-4 ruling.
It still has to be an odd number no matter what. But right now, with the way it is, I'm like, unless we have an appointed moderate,
I honestly think the better way, the easiest fix might be, right, is just to reduce the seat to 8 instead of 9, because you
can't.
No. Think about this, right?
Then nothing's gonna.
No.
You can't be ruled on. Listen.
If it's an 8/8, what happens when it's 8/8, right? The lower court's ruling goes into effect.
Once a bench warmer.
What?
Once a bench warmer.
No, because then the lower court's ruling goes into effect, right? It upholds the lower court's ruling, and if you think about that from like a moral standpoint, right? Doesn't it make sense that if the country is so divided that the Supreme Court can't agree on an issue, then it shouldn't pass? Like a lower court's ruling doesn't have the same amount of power as a Supreme Court ruling, right? It's like if the Supreme Court can't agree, it shouldn't pass a ruling kind of situation. Because the Supreme Court ruling is like end all be all, like.
Well, it is the end all be all. So to leave it on, we can't decide. Let's just have the lower courts decide for us, even though these are the most experienced judges in American history.
That's scary. Alright, so like say right, because what if the lower court ruling comes from like
No, because lower court ruling doesn't have national power, right? If a lower court makes a ruling, it's like that ruling applies to like only the state where that case happened. If a Supreme Court rules on it, then it like gets scrapped at the national level.
But look, the few amount of cases that do go to the Supreme Court are for that purpose.
Right? Yeah, but if they can't decide, then it's like the country's not ready for that yet.
But see, then they wouldn't accept it in the first place.
No, that's not a perfect system.
That is for the most part.
How?
No. The amount of cases that actually go to the Supreme Court, they barely accept any. These are very, very important cases that they know are very important nationwide. So for them to just say, "Oh, we want it to be a nationwide ruling, but we can't decide on it," that's it's been defeated as.
Mm-hmm. But like the people who are deciding it should be a nationwide ruling are doing it based on their own interests. They're not doing it like
okay.
From a constitution.
So the same people that decide it's going to be a nationwide ruling are going to get the say in the case, right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
But you said that they have their own interests in mind.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. They get to decide. The same people who get to say it's a nationwide issue, right? Also get to like decide on what the issue's resolution is.
Right. It's. I have a very high respect for the Supreme Court. So
even right now,
no matter when, I have a very, very high respect for them.
Even right now,
it's just the only difference isn't even political parties anymore. I don't know why anybody assigned any of these judges political parties. It's just how they view the Constitution.
Right. Exactly.
People are the most pure in terms of their reading of the Constitution, and that's the only difference. They don't care about the parties.
Do you remember when I definitely read something? I forgot whether if it was one of the conservative judges, I think it was Brett Kavanaugh, but he said, like, when the impeachment process was going through,
mm-hmm.
and someone said like, oh, if the president does something, it's for the good of the country and therefore it can't be legal. That was an
No,
argument.
that was not Kavanaugh. That was
That was not Lloyd.
No, that was the Harvard lawyer, right?
He's not a Supreme
One
Court
of the
judge.
Supreme Court judges was like agreed with that, and I was like, oh, great.
I mean, I haven't heard that first of all, but second
I'm
of
gonna
all,
look it up.
it's through their view of the Constitution. That's the only reason they'd ever say that.
Yeah, but it is definitely true that. Sorry, no. If so, I'm willing to bet whichever judge said the opinion right, that or like agreed with the opinion that if a president does something, it is for the good of the country because the president chose to do it.
Yeah, they believe it's in the national interest. Yeah,
They believe it's in the national interest. Whichever judge said that, if the president was an opposite political party leader, they would not agree with that statement. So that by definition means, right, like they're a partisan political judge. Because if it was based on their constitutional ruling, right, it wouldn't matter which political party's president is in power for them to agree with that.
I don't remember this, but if I don't know.
I don't think any Supreme Court judge would ever state anything on the impeachment process. That's not their role. They are very, very good at keeping their mouths out of politics because that is their job. I have a very high respect for Supreme Court judges.
I used to until I read that, and I was like,
I don't think any Supreme Court judge would say that. That is completely out of their role. And even like I love RBG, but sometimes she does wander into political fields, and that's what I don't love about her at certain times.
But like she's become like a figure in.
She has become a figure, which she shouldn't be until she retires. That's what I like. Once she retires, go ham. You could be a Bernie supporter. You could be having a Bernie tattoo. That's fine. Not right now. That's not your job.
Yeah.
And that's the only time I'll ever tell anybody to like completely stick to their job. Like the whole shut up and dribble type argument, only because it's so important and it should.
Yeah, no, I agree. That is the only.
Based on the
That is the
Constitution.
only. That is the only role. I would agree if the Supreme Court judges were truly only like the difference were based on how they view the Constitution, and not because of like their personal support of political parties. This would be a perfect system.
It is for that. It's just the appointing of them is the problem.
But no, I see. Theoretically, that shouldn't even be the problem. Like you can appoint someone you think like that views the Constitution a specific way that's considered conservative and progressive, and because of like the balance of power at the time that judge goes through, but then that judge like interprets does rulings on the case based on their constitutional views, right?
Yeah.
If they kept doing that, that would have been fine.
They have for the most part.
No, but this is not true.
It's just that the party.
Their ruling on Supreme Court cases are not just based on like.
For the most part,
They
still are.
rule based on their party's interest. The party
No, I
that
don't think so. I don't think you can say that.
I can.
Sassine, can you cite
I
some?
believe that
The
they do
the
that.
problem is that the parties now have views on how the Constitution is supposed to be framed. Because of the parties' constitutional like belief, they are now picking people that they know agree with that. It's the parties that are choosing. It's not the Supreme Court
How are
judges.
the parties choosing how the Constitution should be viewed?
Well, conservatives are, for the most part, from my experience with them, they're very, very certain on it should be read the way it was written. A very purist view of the Constitution. Nothing else should be changed. Only way it should be changed is through amendments. That's it. And obviously,
fine.
the more progressive way
What
of
is the
looking at it
progressive
is
view?
that it's a living document. Like, obviously, they didn't have the option to include certain things like technology into the original Constitution. So whatever we have there can be interpreted in different ways. It's like the religion argument, where it's like some sects of religions are very purist and others are more progressive in terms of their interpretation.
If that was purely the problem, like the divide in the Supreme Court judges, I don't think I would respect the Supreme Court just as much as you guys.
You should be, because that's
but
what it is.
it's not like that. They don't just purely. They change, like, if you look at the Supreme Court rulings, I'm going to look at it right now, like, it becomes very obvious that there is a bias towards which political party appointed them, and they'll rule in a way that benefits that party.
The political party chosen because of their interpretation of
No,
the
but it's not like, it's not
because-
consistent with their previous
like-
rulings.
They're very consistent throughout their
All
whole
right,
entire life.
Sassine. How do you think?
I'm going to look it up right now. I'm going to show you.
All right, let's see Roe v. Wade.
Okay.
It was 7-2.
Okay.
And there wasn't only two conservatives in there.
Right.
I'll tell you that.
Roe v. Wade was also 50 years ago.
Yeah,
Which
that's
is even
what's so
crazier.
impressive about it.
Which is even crazier.
Which is great because there were conservative judges more than 2.
No,
first
that
of
was
all.
60 years ago.
Whatever. That's
But no.
that's even better.
No,
There's more than
just because it was.
There's more than 2 conservative judges on there, and they passed that ruling 7-2.
Okay.
Which, if they were going by party and who appointed them,
No.
that shouldn't have happened.
I'm not saying that this was always the case. This is a recent development in like the last 20-ish years.
I think Brett Kavanaugh was definitely the turning point of that. I think that's where it's starting to trickle in. But for the most part, I don't think it's significant yet. I think it's significant. Brett Kavanaugh's on that bench, and Brett
he
Kavanaugh,
already
one
said,
vote is,
did some rulings that are quite interesting.
Yeah, but that's also because of who appointed him.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Brett Kavanaugh, I don't think was qualified. So
I think
you could at me.
I think if we ever get to see a Supreme Court justice impeachment, it'd be him. That would be the only one I'd support.
Removal from office. Because
Donald Trump didn't know. He also appointed other judges. His first judge wasn't that bad. He would still who did he appoint instead of Merrick Garland? I forgot who it was.
I forgot.
But whoever it was, that judge was still just a normal conservative judge. He wasn't whatever you want, let me know, bro. I'll pass it kind of guy.
Yeah. Brett Kavanaugh.
That's why I'm saying the fact that Brett Kavanaugh is on the bench is the reason that I say all that I've been saying. It's not like Roe v. Wade times anymore.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and just for the viewers over here, my hatred towards Brett Kavanaugh is not because I presumed he was guilty for
it has nothing
the
to do
sexual
with
assault charges. It was just the way he carried himself and his past history. That's what it's based off of.
I'm not even based off of that. I'm based off of the rulings he passed after he got appointed. I'm like,
that also plays a role for me as well.
I was like,
which ones?
Where's the consistency?
No, which ones so they can get it.
I remember. I'm looking them up right now, but I think the most.
I mean, his view that a sitting president cannot be indicted is
yes, I remember. I definitely knew he said something like that.
Yeah. No matter what he does, about that.
That is
indictment is a very, very big thing to obviously.
That a sitting president cannot be indicted. Holy crap!
It's a big thing to say that. So I don't
the
think
difference between
that type of response,
difference between a dictatorship, right, and a free even if it's not democratic, a free country and a dictatorship is that you can hold the strongest person in your country accountable.
Mm-hmm.
If you can do that, then.
But see, we have different arms to do that. It's just that the arms have given up their power to him.
So therefore we're in a dictatorship.
I mean,
right.
But the thing is to indict a sitting president also means that anybody can indict him. That's the thing. Literally any citizen of America can indict the president at that point. So it's it's very easy to gain the power to indict. To indict the president is very, very questionable, and it might be politicized as well. It might be used as a tool instead of impeachment. Just indict him, and that's what scares me. I do believe that they should be held accountable, but the way he was saying,
based on evidence and stuff. It's not like anyone can you're indicted, you're done.
Depending on the court. I don't love all the courts. I will say I hold the Supreme Court in very high regard. The rest of them not so much. But yeah.
If anything, I definitely hold the.
I don't love how
high court in higher right now at least, right, in higher regard than the Supreme Court.
I don't love how Brett Kavanaugh just kind of brushed that aside as obviously type thing. I think there's a very valid argument in terms of that, which I thought he completely disregarded. So that's where it stands. So.
Fair.
Yeah. So anything else you guys want to add to this?
I think we have gone on for an hour. I think it's time to
wrap it up?
Yeah, time to wrap it up.
Thank you guys. This is our first live podcast with the boys. As you guys can already notice. We couldn't get
all the way
to
GW for this.
Yeah, so if you guys can please view some more, share it, so we can get Mod of a ticket to come here as well. That'd be perfect. And we'd have nice roundtable discussions where we all yell at each other.
Exactly.
Right. Have a good night. Hope you guys enjoyed this episode of the podcast. Bye.